Hi.
Jesus, who are you? How the hell did you get in here?
I'm Carl. The front door was unlocked.
No, it wasn't.
I mean the bathroom window. I used a crowbar. Will you paint these for me with this paint right here?
All right, listen, pal.
This is my custom chapter and it has to look perfect! Okay, bye.
Hey again, hobby friends. Say a month or so ago, I heard through the internet hobby grapevine that Barnes & Noble's bookstore was clearancing out all their Warhammer products. And I didn't even know that they carried Games Workshop at Barnes & Noble, but I decided to check out my local store and see what they had. It seems that Games Workshop carries some exclusive products for only Barnes & Noble, and most of them are just repackaging, and most of them have fewer models. But they did have something called the Blitz Bowl Build and Paint Set, because apparently Blood Bowl is too graphic and violent for normie novel readers. MSRP on the box was $35 and it was clearance down to $9, which isn't really a bad deal at all considering you get 10 paints, you get some plastic glue, can never have too much of that for assembling your models, you get a sprue snippers, which is actually pretty respectable, and you get a very suspect looking Citadel paintbrush. Oh, and side note, inside the box there's this weird little sheet of paper which I've never seen before in a Games Workshop product. It's probably in the fine print somewhere on the instructions to build the models typically. But in this sheet, it refers to the products within the box as chemical toys. So I propose that from now on, we call all of our Warhammer related hobby products chemical toys, because that just sounds way more badass and scary for parents. So my plan was to bring this home and paint the model included in the box, this Blood Bowl human right here. But when I got home and opened the box, I realized that in fact the fine print says, example of use, miniature not included. So we're gonna have to bring out one model that I've been excited to paint for a while, and that is the exclusive Gorzag Git Stump. Now, I've never painted an orc before, but I thought, what the hey, here's the time to start. Today's video is brought to us by Surfshark. And if you're anything like me, when you get free time, you want to be at the hobby desk hobbying. You don't want to be worrying about all those terrible adulting things in the world like your information out on the internet. And that's where Surfshark comes in. They encrypt all your data so your privacy is kept anytime you're online. Personal information, financial information, companies tracking you with targeting ads to make sure that they always know what's going on with you, not while Surfshark's got your back. There's no more region locks for when you're streaming as well. Did you know that there's like 24 different regions around the world for places like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, and all the others? And they tell you what you can and can't watch. Not with Surfshark. You can pick your location from anywhere around the world and then watch shows that you wouldn't have access to in your home region. And you only need one account and all your devices are covered. Now, all you got to do is go to the link below in the video description and you get 3 months free and 83% off after that by using promo code NINJAN. A big thank you to Surfshark for supporting the channel. Let's get back to the video. After I assembled and primed Gorzag, I realized that I created a grievous sin. I forgot to drill out his gun barrel. But fear not, noble internet warriors, I went back and I drilled it after the fact. Don't ever be worried that after your model is primed that you just can't go back and fix things you didn't see before. Whether it's gaps, whether it's mold lines, or you forget to drill out a gun barrel. Better to do it now. If you can see it, other people looking at your models will see it too. So the main issue we're going to have to overcome with this paint job is our extremely limited color range, especially considering it's not one that I had chosen for myself. I just have to deal with what's in the box. Now the set comes with 10 paints, which seems like a pretty good amount, but when you consider one of them is a texture paint for the basing, one is actually a shade, an Agrax Earth shade, one is a metallic, and then we have black and white. The actual core colors we have to work with are just 5. What I really want to figure out today is, can we paint this model well with a very limited paint range, and what techniques do we need to utilize in order to best achieve that result? Whether you're a brand new painter with very few paints, or you just want to limit your analysis paralysis in paint selection in a project, let's see what we can do. Because our paint set comes with a very dark and desaturated green, our orc is not going to be a classically bright green color. We can still make him look great, but we need to keep in mind that the more subdued skin color should influence the rest of our paint job. What I mean by that is his skin should still be the main focal point of the paint job. So we'll go with a more realistic, less hyper vibrant color palette for the entire mini. I do want the skin to be overall brighter than this dark Death World Forest green that comes in the paint set. So I mix in some Averland Sunset, which is almost a yellow ochre color, to bring some warmth and brightness to the skin, and put that on as our mid-tone color. And I use this mid-tone to cover a majority of the skin. I still want to keep the darkest parts that pure Death World Forest, so we can keep this feeling of green throughout the skin as we add more depth to it. And right away, I'm seeing how this restriction in my colors is forcing me to improvise and adapt and overall become a better miniature painter. First of all, it's a learning experience in color mixing. We've got to get creative. We got to test out color combinations on our palette. And I found that oftentimes the resulting color from mixes didn't look at all like what I thought it would in my head. So it allows me to learn and think about what other colors to mix with my base tone other than just white, which tends to be pretty boring and doesn't make our miniatures pop from a distance. And as we mix in more of this Averland Sunset and a little bit of the skin tone Bugman's Glow, I work in tighter and tighter spaces that would catch the most light. And while I did use the brush that came in the box for about 80% of the mini, it took about 15 minutes for the little synthetic tip to start curling. So for the fine detail work, I brought out my nice size 3 Monument Hobbies Kolinsky Sable, which I use for any of the details, big or small. And you can find this brush as well as all the other gear that I use in miniature painting in the video description below if you want to check anything out for yourself. And if you order right through Monument Hobbies or Michigan Toy Soldier, you get a nice discount off your purchase at no cost to you, and it supports the channel. To increase the interest of this skin, we're going to work on the shadows. I mix together Mephiston Red and Abaddon Black, and I add a bunch of water to that to make a glaze. I've found that using glazes for the shadows and layering for the highlights works best. Light, bright colors tend to get kind of chalky when you make them so thin to a glaze, but dark colors go on smooth and allow you to use multiple layers to build up how much depth of color you want in those shadows. To me, this is one of the most fulfilling parts of painting a miniature, is glazing in the shadows. It's crazy how quickly it adds depth and life to the surface. A quick tip about glazing. Now, we're making very thin paint here, and what's going to happen is that thin paint is going to suck itself into the bristles of our brush. So before we ever touch the model, we want to make sure we dab our brush onto a paper towel so most of that moisture and paint gets sucked out of the brush. This is not a wash where we're flooding the model with the color. It's very exact, so we don't want very much paint on our brush. Just about everything in the world that we see around us has some level of texture to it. So one little thing that I do as a final step, no matter what I'm painting, to add some interest to the model is to create some texture. So for this skin, I'm taking a mix of white and this Averland Sunset and dabbing on some tiny, tiny dots all over the skin to show as if he's got some kind of freckles or little imperfections in the skin that the light is hitting. One trap that I am more than guilty of falling into in my mini painting is bringing out 5 or 10 different brown colors to paint every different cloth, satchel, pouch, or whatever else I want painted brown in a project. This can hurt your painting process in a few ways. First of all, you're wasting all of that time finding whichever different browns you want to use, and then you put each individual one on your palette just to paint one tiny little thing. It's a waste of time. And second, you're missing an opportunity to both learn and create harmony in your paint job. If you just take your one brown and you find how mixing that with a little bit of white or a little bit of yellow or a little bit of green will create slight variations of your brown, you saved yourself a lot of time. You're already using the paints that are on your palette, so you're not wasting any, and you're creating harmony in the overall project because that tint of that same brown finds itself all over the model, and your eyes are focused on the things you want the audience to see, not this barrage of brown all over the model. Contrast is a phrase we hear a lot about in miniature painting, and it can be a little bit overwhelming because there's all these different kinds of contrast, and how do I use which one? One quick tip that I use for creating nice contrast in my models is I place dark sections of the model next to bright sections of the model. This way my eye differentiates them and it's striking from a distance. Because I want Gorzag's skin to be nice and bright and a center of attention, I'm going to paint his sleeveless overcoat a nice mixed dark gray color. The sleeveless trench coat really is an underrepresented part of my wardrobe. We still want the dark portions of our models to have highlights and to have some interest to them, but we just need to be more restrained to it. I try to keep my brighter highlights on those surfaces as tiny dots and scratches and jagged edge highlights. And again, I'm going to glaze into the shadows with pure Abaddon black to reinforce that this is a really dark material. For the mouth, I use that really dark red that we use to put in the shadows on the skin to give a nice base coat. And then working up the teeth, I added some Averland Sunset and some pure white in successive layers in order to create some nice, bright, bony looking teeth. And then a few dots of pure white to show that there is, in fact, some actively used incisors on Gorzag. Because our paint palette is pretty limited for this project, I wanted to make sure that I used every paint, and I realized I hadn't used the Agrax Earthshade yet. So continuing with my dark things next to light things philosophy, I wanted the fur on his hat and boots to be a nice tan fur. Using Agrax Earthshade is great around really textured materials like fur because it brings some contrast really quickly. I then just mix up some white with that base tan color I created to create a couple of dots on each of the fur tufts to bring some more interest and for the eye to feel like it's actually bright fur, not just a brown mid-tone fur. Our last major portion to paint on the model are all of the metallics. Now, just because we only have one silver in the box doesn't mean that we're stuck with everything looking like Leadbelcher. We can create our own variations and mixtures with the paints that are already on our palette. A little black or brown into metallic dulls it down and makes it a darker starting point. And heck, even some yellow and red can be mixed together to make our own version of a bronze. One issue you have in dealing with just one silver color is this is as bright as you're going to get to go. So in order to make highlights later, we need to make sure that the base color of our metallics is dark enough that the bright highlights we create from the pure Leadbelcher will show and create interest. I cover all my metallics with the Agrax Earthshade. This nice brown wash brings us some gritty, dirty look to our metallics, which is fitting for an orc. And then you can even mix in a little bit of black to your Agrax Earthshade to create an even darker wash, to go over certain sections of the metallics to create some shadows. Or if you want a blackened iron look like I'm using for some of his Bojangles, then you can use that there as well. I don't know about you, but I've never seen an orc with his armor and weapons being a perfectly shiny silver, so let's add some rust to Gorzag here. Luckily for us, the Mournfang brown in this set is a beautiful orangish brown that is great for making rust. I just thin it down with a bit of water and dab it into those sections where moisture would collect on the armor and weapons, where rust would naturally come to pass. And the final step on our metals is to come back in with that pure lead belcher to create some jagged highlights on the edges and surfaces of the metal. Now is where we see the work that we did to dull down the metals earlier really pays off. We create this nice, bright looking edge highlights on our metals so they really stick out from the tabletop. The final paint of the set we've yet to use is called Armageddon Dust, which is a tan colored paint with some grit like sand mixed into the paint. This creates a natural look of sand or dirt on the base of the model. I also took some of this paint and thinned it down on my palette a little bit and dabbed it around the lower sections of the model. So I bring the model together with the base so they feel like they exist in the same world. Now this texture paint takes a while to dry, so let's work on something else while it's doing so. Throughout this project, I used the Mephiston Red Paint, always dulled down on different parts of the model. That's because it's a very bright and vibrant color, and I didn't want it to distract unless I really had a purpose for it. And that purpose is for Gorzag's eyes. Our eyes as the viewer need to be drawn right to this bright red. And what better place than that bright, beautiful orc face. And once our texture paint is dried, I cover the entire thing with an Agrax Earthshade wash and then mix a bit of Averland Sunset and white together and just dot some highlights on that ground texture to create a bit of depth. And with that, our paint job of the mighty Gorzag Git Stampa is complete. I gotta say, I had a lot more fun with this painting project than I expected I would have. Was it because this was the first orc I've ever painted and they are glorious to paint? Yep. Was it also because I took a lot of the heartache out of the process and just had fun with the colors I had at my disposal? Also, yep. Hey, can you do me a favor and comment below if you like this experiment with the starter paint set? Maybe you tried it before, let me know how that went, or maybe you're excited to try it now. As well, as long as you're down there, why don't you post any future video ideas you have for me? I'll read all the comments from the videos. And speaking of comments and talking about mini painting and talking about video ideas and just hanging out, my Discord, which is attached to my Patreon, is where I do that. Without the help of these patrons, I can't make the videos and get the gear and improve every single video. So thank you to all of you that support me over there. You can also check out my Ninjon merch on ninjon.net if you want a sweet shirt or a hoodie, as well as check out the description links of all the gear that I use, and I get a slight kickback at no cost to you, or in some cases, you even get a nice discount. Thanks for hanging out today. Be good to one another, and make sure you find time in your day to slay the gray. Gorzag... What time? So it's next to the whites. God, I'm just fucking rambling.